a lot of issues. So I would say the number one lesson that I learned was to, if I'm ever going to get a really old deal again, I learned a lot of really detailed stuff that I won't get into, but I'd be very careful, and it's unlikely I'll do that again. Another lesson that I think I learned is to have really good adequate reserves and not overcapitalize, but have enough money sitting in the bank, especially with those older properties, and have sufficient contingency capital, because we did run into situations where so much was going wrong that we didn't anticipate that we had to go and borrow more money. We had to go and find more money from a debt investor.
Welcome, everybody, to the Breaking Resistance podcast. I am your co-host, Francisco, and then we have a special guest here today. He's a good friend of ours, but overall, how's it going today, John?
It's good. It's good. You sound a little hesitant today. I think it's because of your mic, but I think we're
I've been having issues with my mic, but let's see.
It's all good. It's all good. You sound crystal clear. It's good. Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of Breaking Resistance. Glad to have you with us. We do have an amazing guest today. He's close and dear to my heart because he is a partner, a friend, a business colleague. A previous, mentee. It's all of the above. All of the above. All of the above.
That's right.
So, He's a man of many talents, came from a really interesting background. I can't wait to share his story with you. Shawn Dimartile with Pack 3 Capital. Welcome to the show, man.
Thanks so much, guys, for having me on. I'm super pumped to tell my story, talk to you guys. I feel honored to be on the show. Thank you for the great introduction.
Yeah, no,
good deal.
Shawn,
good deal.
I know it's a little bit different for you now, just because and I know you have your own podcast. So it's just like, how does it feel to kind of be on the other side of the equation this time?
You know what? It feels fine. I feel like after doing so many podcast episodes now, like it's really easy for me to just get on and kick it and free flow conversation, especially because our podcast is not really very structured. So I'm used to kind of these just like normal conversation type podcasts.
Fireside
and
chat.
So now I'm used to it and it feels good. I enjoy it. It's going to be interesting to have somebody asking me all the questions, but I think I can hang.
Well, just to kick us off, tell the audience again what your podcast is and where they can find it, and just to kick that off.
Thanks for the plug, guys. So I run a podcast called the Multifamily Takeoff, primarily focused on multifamily investing. We have all kinds of big names in the business, everyone from John Azar, obviously. That's how we first met a couple of years ago, to pretty much anybody that you can name that's written a book on multifamily, things like that. And you could find us by just looking at the Multifamily Takeoff. Takeoff because we were air traffic controllers. That's why that's kind of thrown in there. But multifamilytakeoff.com, and you could find us on, Spotify, stuff like that.
So that's a good segue into our entree as to how we can start. So air traffic controller to multifamily investor, podcaster, operator of the whole nine yards. Let's back up a little bit. How did you even get into air traffic controlling? Even before that, and how did that come about in your life?
Yeah, good question. Really interesting story about, it's kind of random, but basically, I was in college.
All about random. We love random stories.
We're going to go down the rabbit hole then here. So I was in college, University of Louisville. I grew up in Louisville, Kentucky. None of my family had ever gone to college and gotten a degree before, and I was on the path to become one of the first to do that. I was doing engineering school and 2 years into college, and my family didn't really have any money. My parents couldn't afford to put me through college, so I was working full time to pay for my living expenses, things like that, while going to college. And obviously that's not easy, especially if you're doing something like engineering. It's very difficult. So I was kind of struggling in life with money, doing 99-cent bean and cheese burritos at Taco Bell, still Same order was the cheesy bean and rice burrito, no fiesta, add sour cream, and I pretty much lived off of that.
Hey, he's still
But
his orders. Damn.
yeah. Just in case anyone wants to follow the same path to the T, that's where you're going to start. But anyways, I wasn't doing very well, and my parents knew that. But my mom worked for TSA, airport security, right? And one of her girlfriend's husband was an air traffic controller at the Louisville airport. And, through gossip, my mom telling her, me, trying to grind my way through college and stuff. And then I guess this lady's husband heard about it and was like, hey, man, tell that guy to come up to the air traffic control tower because this is a great job. There's a huge shortage of air traffic controllers. I think I can, help him out. So I accepted that invitation, went up into the air traffic control tower, and basically everyone in the control tower, first of all, I learned that they make really good money. And that the path to get there, like, you don't need a degree. And every single person in that tower was ex-military air traffic controllers. So they were all either Air Force or Navy or Marines, ex-Marines, right, all that, and got hired by the FAA when they got out. And they were all telling me about how this path is it's a great path. They're like, man, look, you can go join the military. They'll train you. You'll pretty much get automatically hired when you get out. And they even have programs to pay off your student loans. And at this point, I was really getting stressed out about the student loans because I was borrowing to pay for college plus extra to help cover some of my living expenses. And that was just racking up. And obviously, that's super stressful. Long story short, I basically was just sold on that idea. I was like, wait a minute, this makes perfect sense. I approached the Navy and essentially joined in on their loan repayment program. So they pay off your federal student loans over the course of 4 years. And I accepted that. And a couple months later, I was off to join the Navy and become an air traffic controller.
That's awesome. Well, first of all, thank you for your service. And second of all, how long did you stay in the Navy?
I did 5 years. That's the minimum for air traffic controllers. So I did my 5 years, and crazy enough, I'm a little bit lucky and just had great timing because I started applying for the Federal Aviation Administration to be an air traffic controller with about 12 months left on my service. So that I was going through the hiring process, and I actually got hired. And my first day at my facility as an air traffic controller in the FAA was the next day after I separated from the Navy. So I had no gap.
Oh man,
That's insane.
That's amazing. That's good timing.
Yeah.
Well done. Well done on timing that.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
How was your experience in the Navy?
My experience in the Navy was, honestly, it was a good one, especially compared to how a lot of other people's experience. When I went to the Navy's Air Traffic Control School in Pensacola, Florida, I was like super hyper focused because, I had this plan the whole time that I wanted to get a good facility. I don't want to get on a aircraft carrier because that's not as good of experience for the FAA. So I knew the way it works is, in order of the graduating class. So if you graduate the top of your class, you have first pick on orders to where you're going to go. So if there's 10 people graduating from your class, they'll have 10 different sets of orders, and they say, all right, you finished first with the best grades, so you pick out of these 10. And so that's what I did. I busted my butt, and I was able to pick, and one of my choices was San Diego, and I wasn't going to pass that up. So I spent my entire 5 years in the Navy on shore duty here in San Diego, California. Never had to deploy, things like that. So honestly, life was great. I was in one of the best cities in the United States, learning air traffic control. So I would say overall my experience was great, especially compared to other people that have to endure a lot more.
Damn, that sounds like the life, Francisco. You might need to join.
I know.
It was nice, man. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, for sure. No, and I know you've seen this too, John, but I love the fact that there's just so many people that are coming from the military and they have a military background who are now jumping into real estate. I mean, we even have clients, even like ourselves, and I love the fact that the word and the inspiration and the motivation for having those who are transitioning out of the military to also have the opportunity for them to dive into real estate. And I know that probably, I'm not sure if that was still in your plan. You were still doing air traffic control, but the fact that you already stumbled into real estate, and we've been seeing that similarly from a lot of our clients, it's amazing that that's actually happening now today in today's world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you've got one of the, and I think one of those reasons why is because you have one of the most powerful real estate investment tools coming out of the military, which is the VA loan. I mean, that's just a way to supercharge your real estate investing by getting your first property that way, which is one of the things that I've done. But and I think it's great. Yeah, a lot of them jumping in and multiplying that over and over again.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Why do you think there's such a big influx now into real estate from folks in the military?
I think because more and more people are telling their story of how they've been able to leverage VA loans and in order to grow a portfolio. There's a lot of other podcasts and resources now that are explaining to military folks how to get this done.
Yeah.
But with the VA loan, being able to put 0% down on a property, and you can do this for a property that's a multifamily, a small multifamily. You could do a
duplex,
2-3 unit
triplex.
you can buy something like that and then house hack it, rent out some of it, live in it, whatever, and with zero money down, which is insanity.
That's amazing.
So I think so many people are hearing that. They're sharing their stories of how they were able to use that and then multiply that and grow a portfolio. And it's picking up steam now because I'm always telling people in the military, trying to give them advice on how to get that done. And now you're just seeing this influx of people trying to use it to now invest, because especially out here in like a place like San Diego, I mean, heck, you got a place in San Diego where you've got a whole lot of military people, and a lot of these people bought houses for 0% down, and San Diego real estate's just bananas. They're increasing 19-20% year over year, and then they go and tell their friends and family about how they grew their wealth that way, and they're like, oh, wait a minute. And so I think that's the big reason.
Yeah, we're coming up across a lot of people that are still in the military and started doing this while they're still serving, they're still active, and they're still doing, and they started in the real estate.
I think that's a great thing, man. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
100%. Yeah, and we live in an era where, we're just so overwhelmed with the information of the fact that, but real estate and investing and the finance world is now starting to kind of be more open to the public. So there's more information out there for people to really be knowledgeable on, hey, you know what, I can actually transition or not be in the 9-to-5 anymore. I can actually create something, and real estate being like the number one that everyone really wants to jump into. So it makes 100%. A lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely, man. And like you were saying, like, you have so much information at your fingertips now for free. This podcast, you could probably learn a ton from previous guests, other podcasts. There's free, content on people's websites, blogs and stuff. And I feel like just even 10 years ago when I was in the Navy, still like my early years, the internet was already huge then. But all of this explosion of information about real estate investing, it's still kind of young, because there was all these podcasts and stuff just weren't out back then.
There was no podcast. Yeah. It wasn't as what it is today. You didn't have your Spotify's of the world. And then, 10 years ago we had I think Facebook and MySpace was still kind of like already kind of getting out. And now it's just like, you don't even know what to download. There's so much out there that you can just easily access in the hands of your fingertips.
Yeah, it's like a free university kind of, but yeah, exactly.
For sure.
Yeah. Information
flow
is king these days, and it's more available than any other time in our history. I'm sorry, Francisco, I cut you off.
Yeah. No, you're good. So I just kind of wanted to backtrack a little bit, because I know you said you were raised in Louisville, Kentucky. Besides you guys having like the best bourbon in the world, kind of walk us through exactly of like your childhood, your upbringing while you were in Louisville.
Happy to do it. So taking it all the way back, I was actually born in Orange County, California. My parents grew up there. Both grew up there, went to high school and everything, met each other there, and then when I was about 5 years old, my mother's parents moved to Louisville, Kentucky, where they grew up, because it's so much cheaper, and they're retiring, right? And so my
Yeah.
parents decided to follow them out there because they had 3 kids now, trying to raise them in Southern California. And even way back then, 30 years ago, they were like, hey, this is too expensive. And so they made the move to raise us over there. And while we were in Louisville, Kentucky, I mean, very humble beginnings. Like, we didn't have a lot of money. My dad worked for a place called HQ, which was like an old Lowe's or Home Depot, basically, before those came around. And my mother worked at this Christian school that I went to. And like for years, we lived with my grandparents. My parents would get like free boxes of essential household items and stuff from the church to kind of help out. And it took a while for my parents to, I think, really get a good base under them and then start doing better and being able to provide more. And then they stopped needing that. And grew up in the suburbs. I lived like this really traditional American, a lifestyle of living in a cul-de-sac and riding my bikes with my friends, all that kind of stuff. But we didn't have a lot of money. And so I grew up not knowing anything about how money works. Investing. I didn't really have anybody to lean on or any mentor or somebody to look up to that had money. I didn't know anybody that had money in my life. And I remember growing up and like going to like I was really into baseball when I was younger, hardcore. I remember like going to baseball practice and stuff, and kids having like the new bats, the new TPX bats and stuff like that, and we got everything from Play It Again Sports. And I remember like having those thoughts and like realizing like, oh man, these kids have like all kinds of cool stuff. Like my parents can't afford that. I realized that at an early age. And I always had this desire to, like, I wanted to go, just to be honest, I wanted to go and kind of work my way up the social class ladder a little bit. I talked about it with my mom and dad when I was younger and when I was in high school. So I was driven to try and climb a little bit. And, that was what kind of drove me to try to go to college. That's why I picked engineering. Like, I mean, just being brutally honest, I was trying to pick stuff just that like made better money. That's kind of what I was, one of those people at home, like Googling like degrees that make the most money and stuff like that. So I was trying to grind my way through college, if we speed it up a little bit and get into the whole, get some kind of a degree that I can then lean on and make better money. And then obviously, like I spoke about, getting into the Navy and stuff to try and solve that problem. But I had always had this desire to do something. Like, I did not want to live in the, continue, like, wanting money and needing money, not having money. I didn't want to be down there anymore.
Yeah. That's amazing.
No, for sure.
Wow. Yeah, I even didn't know that about you, about your background, man. That's
man.
That's fantastic. That's that is impressive to come from that and go through life and now be in a position where you have a completely different appreciation and understanding of what you have and what you can get to and how to earn it, which is amazing.
Yeah, man. Like, I always tell people too, because like to kind of put it in perspective, like now I live a great life. I'm in San Diego. I have this awesome apartment in Little Italy. I'm truly blessed, and I realize that. And I tell people, like, to put in perspective too, that my brother and I, so my brother's 2 years older than me, so we were in high school at the same time. We didn't have a big house, and we didn't have enough bedrooms. Me and my brother shared a bunk bed, all right, in a small bedroom until my brother left for college. He played baseball in college for a little bit. But until my brother left for college, we were both in high school, 2 high school boys living in a bunk bed and taking the bus to school. And like, you don't hear that very often of like two pretty grown kids sharing a bunk bed still, but it's true, man. We really did. We didn't have a lot.
Yeah, no, it definitely opens your eyes for you to be a lot more grateful, definitely grateful and appreciative of where you've came from and to where you are now. Because I see your post, man. You have like probably one of the sickest rooftops I've ever seen. I almost feel like he's cool. In Vegas every single day. I mean,
yeah, I feel the same way, but I am super, super blessed, and I understand that for sure.
Yeah, no, 100%, no, for sure. So
go ahead, Francisco.
Go ahead.
No. I was just going to kind of take us through now that we we started with somewhat back, and then we went way back, and now let's kind of jump forward a little bit. So you know, tell us how you stumbled
Yeah.
on real estate, and how did you transition from air traffic controlling into real estate?
Happy to. So I have this buddy, Anthony Espinoza. If he by chance hears this, shout out to you, brother. He was my roommate for a little while when I lived by the beach, and I was in the Navy here in San Diego. And he was in commercial real estate. He worked for this big commercial real estate firm, and he was also a real estate agent. And I grabbed coffee with him one time, and this is, a couple years in air traffic control. And by this point, I'm finally making like a pretty good income, a good six-figure income, and I was super pumped about that. And I was still living really modestly and saving money, and I wanted to invest. And I was telling him about this coffee shop. I was like, dude, I finally like am in a position now where now I want to like start investing and trying to grow this and make something of this. And he said, dude, you should, this is probably 6 years ago or something, maybe longer. He said, dude, you should check out real estate podcasts. And he mentioned Bigger Pockets and said, just give it a listen. And you should really consider real estate investing. I think that's the best thing for you. And so I after that conversation, it's funny because I didn't listen to that podcast or anything for like a while. And then I was on my way to a backpacking trip in the mountains, which is like my favorite hobby. And I'm driving, and it's a long 6-hour drive. And I was like, screw it. I guess I'll put on this podcast because I'm sick of listening to music. And that moment completely changed my life because I got hooked, and I kept hearing of these people telling their stories. And it was people that sounded like me. I kept hearing like guys that were like, oh, yeah, I was a teacher, just making a modest salary. Started getting one property, then rolled that into the next one, and then the next one. And then they grew these portfolios and were quitting their jobs. And I loved hearing those stories. I loved hearing about somebody that was, a single mom with 3 kids that was able to still somehow scrape and grind and then grow a real estate portfolio. And hearing all of that and hearing people that I could relate to, that's when the light bulb went off. And so I basically listened to every one of those podcasts front to back. And anytime like a book at the end of the show was mentioned, like someone was like, oh, this is the book I recommend, I would buy the book on Amazon, and I just read through stacks and stacks of these real estate books. And so it just kind of, I went down the rabbit hole. I really got pretty obsessive with it. And next thing you know, I started to feel like I had enough of the knowledge needed to at least get started. And then essentially, at this point, I'm working at air traffic control, and at this facility, I have my friends Mike and Rich that I'm talking about real estate with pretty much every day. We would see each other in the break room, mention a book we had just read, like, oh, dude, you should go read this book about apartment investing. And then we'd all read it, talk about it. And then we're all 3 separately looking for our first properties to get. And we're talking about how, oh yeah, I'm underwriting this one. I don't know, man. It's like okay. It's like a 6% cash on cash return. Looks like this. And it's all right. And then I think it was Rich that came up with the idea. He said, why don't we just put all our money together and go buy like a legit bigger apartment? And we all 3 were like, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And so we were kind of, we're so fresh and new to this. We don't have a mentor at this point, but we just dove all in. I mean, we went for it, man. No mentor, nobody to help guide us, just what we read in books, listened to our podcast. And we all 3, this is how into it we were. We all liquidated our 401ks. I mean, you can't be more committed and, diving into something because there's really no turning back once you do that. And so we did that, and we all went and bought our first property, which was a 32-unit apartment complex. And that was my first real estate investment ever, was a 32-unit apartment.
That's great. That's awesome.
That's awesome. I love that whole
That's
story.
the one in Cincinnati, right?
Yeah.
Something like that? Wasn't it Cincinnati?
It was in Indianapolis, just outside of Indy.
Indianapolis,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that I love that story because you'd be surprised how many folks I actually speak to, and younger guys too, and guys my age as well, that they're always saying or coming up with the excuse of, oh, I don't think I'm ready yet, or oh, I'm not too sure. But they'll read and take all of this information, but never put it to action. And I feel if you just take that action, because if you keep waiting and waiting, you'll never find that perfect time. The perfect time is today. That's the perfect time.
I agree.
So
Yeah.
it's just intake all the information. I mean, read as much as you can, listen to as many podcasts. Even if you don't have a mentor, like you mentioned, you didn't have anybody who was guiding you, but you were self-educating yourself. And the time for you to execute is now. Don't wait, because the more you wait, then you're never going to get it done. You'll always come up with an excuse, and fear is going to get in the way. It's always scary to jump into the unknown, but look at all the success that you guys have brought to the table because you guys took action.
Yeah, I think that, piggybacking off of that, I know what it's like when you're getting started, obviously. And I know that when you're putting a lot on the line, you're just worried about making mistakes. You're worried about the worst case scenario happening. And I'm here to tell you, if you're listening to this, there is no amount of reading you're going to do. There's no amount of podcast listening you're going to do. There's no amount of anything you're going to do to avoid making some mistakes. I promise you're going to make mistakes.
You should.
That's just
more
the-
importantly,
that's just-
you should make mistakes, because that's what's going to teach you what not to do for next time. That's really what's going to be the greatest teacher for you. Are mistakes. If you end up doing a project and it goes smooth as heck, and you don't make any mistakes, and nobody trips up on anything, you're not learning anything. You're just, all you're learning is that, damn, this is too easy.
No.
Exactly, yeah. And like, you'd rather make some of those mistakes now and get that out of the way, learn your lessons, and apply them to the next deal. Trust me, we made a bunch of mistakes on that 32 unit, but we still did really well. I mean, it was an amazing investment still. But at the end of the day,
You just sold that property, right?
yeah, in January. We just sold it.
Nice.
We 3x'd our money in 2 years, just a little over 2 years. So it was a crazy good investment. But that was not easy. I can promise you that. I learned a ton of stuff, but I never would have learned that stuff if I wouldn't have done the deal. Because especially in real estate, there's so many facets to real estate and different variables and levers and things that could happen that it's impossible to put it all in one book. It would be a crazy big book. So you're just going to have to get started. I mean, even people today that have been doing this for a really long time, even John is going to make some mistakes. Like, he's been doing this a really long time.
Brother, I make
He'll still make
mistakes all the time.
It's just-
I'm the first one that says,
Yeah.
I still make mistakes. I'm still learning every day. I still learn every week, every month, every year. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah, and in real estate, I always like to say it's a game of chess, not checkers. So every single deal, every single project, every single real estate piece that you look at, it's always going to be unique in its own way. It's never going to go exactly the same as your last deal or your previous deal. It's always going to be different, but again, that's what creates good thick skin. So when you're going into your next deal, you already know what to expect. So it's always risk adjust. It's always calculating, having a calculated risk every single time you go into a deal.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Speaking of thick skins, so you get into your first deal. You don't know what you're doing, and then what? Did you launch the podcast first, or did the podcast come before that deal, or because when I first met you guys, you already had the podcast, and so, in fact, that's how I met you. I was on your podcast.
I think it was like simultaneously, basically. Like, at the same time we were getting that deal, we started the podcast. I want to say the podcast might have started just a couple of months before we closed on that deal. But yeah, it was like right around that time, because we basically just did everything. Like, we read the best ever book on syndication, which is a really popular book in the apartment world. And like, in that book, he's talking about you should start, be a content creator, things like podcasts, YouTube. You should have your own like real estate meetup if you want to attract more people. You should write blogs. It goes through this whole list, right, of a blueprint of things to put yourself out there and start to grow. And we just said, all right, let's treat this like a blueprint and do every single one of these things. So
Nice.
did all of it. But the podcast was right around that time that we got that 32
That's cool.
unit. Yeah.
That's awesome. What do you think, as you kind of think back through your journey from that first purchase that you did and first, entree into the market that you did until now, what do you think is sort of, I guess maybe, 2 or 3 top lessons that you've learned in the past 3 or 4 years of going through? What do you think that is?
First one that comes to mind without hesitation is being really careful buying old vintage assets. Never say never, but unlikely that I will ever purchase another asset 1960s or older. And the reason why I say that is just because, unless the properties, there could be a situation the property's already been renovated really well or something that I'd be interested in. But I'm really hesitant to buy stuff that old now because so much goes wrong. It's, especially maybe even as a newbie. We're talking, the piping was cast iron piping that we're replacing. We weren't really expecting it to go so wrong, that piping right away. Those components, think about it. All the wiring, the plumbing, everything is from the 60s. And if they haven't changed it, like all of the plumbing, the connections that all those pipes have and stuff like that, they're not meant to last for forever. And so they're just you're springing leaks all over the place like it's going nuts. And you're just going to find a lot of issues. So I would say the number one lesson that I learned was to, if I'm ever going to get a really old deal again, I learned a lot of really detailed stuff that I won't get into, but I'd be very careful, and it's unlikely I'll do that again. Another lesson that I think I learned is to have really good, adequate reserves and not overcapitalize, but have enough money sitting in the bank, especially with those older properties, and have sufficient contingency capital, because we did run into situations where so much was going wrong that we didn't anticipate that we had to go and borrow more money. We had to go and find more money from a debt investor to get some of this stuff fixed. We ended up making out okay, but that was just a really hard, good learning lesson that if you're buying something like that's really old, all those components, like you could get the best inspection on the planet, and they still can't peel back all the layers of the onion. They still can't look at absolutely everything, and a lot will go wrong, and you got to be ready for it. So those are by far the
people
biggest lessons.
forget that all that inspections is going to give you the way that the state of things now. It's not going to give you the way. It's not going to give you like what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month or 3 months from now. Inspectors' job are to tell you what's going on now, what needs to be addressed now, and maybe good inspectors will be able to tell you hey, this might need to be. You need to address that probably in the next year or so. Good inspectors should be able to tell you that, on a good inspection.
Absolutely.
In the next year or so, this item might need to be, taken care of, or in the next couple of years or something like that. But not all inspectors do that. Some inspectors,
Exactly.
again, that's what differentiates sometimes good inspection from bad inspection, or just, average inspections is some inspectors, they don't have to do that. They can just tell you, here's what's going on now, and here's what's wrong, and here's what's not wrong. But they don't tell you hey man, in the next 3 years, you might want to save some money for this because it might break. Not all inspectors do that.
And it's funny that you brought that up too, because one of our biggest issues was the air conditioners going out. They're dropping like flies. Within the first year of ownership, because we got an inspection done, and they did mention these air conditioners, they're in working order. It's hard to determine how much useful life they have left on them, but they all definitely need to be cleaned and maintenance and stuff. We get them all cleaned, and then I'm talking 1 to 2 air conditioners per month in the summer were crapping out, and we had to buy new ones. And those are, between $3,500 and $4,000 a pop to replace at the time. And so that was just this huge expense line item. We're talking tens of thousands of dollars now in air conditioners. So exactly, great point to bring up.
No, absolutely. As you are now going through what you obviously we met. I got on your podcast. We did it actually a couple of deals together. What's next? What's next for Shawn? Where do you see yourself headed in the next 3 to 5 years?
I think in the next 3 to 5 years, I like to say the acceleration is increasing dramatically. The first couple of years of this was really slow going while we waited for that 32 unit to come to fruition. We had that podcast with you, and we talked about how we felt that connection, would really like you and John, or you and Tony, to potentially be our mentors. That started picking up speed. And now returning investors asking for more deals to invest in is starting to happen. and they're attracting more people to us as investors. So the growth is starting to really pick up steam. So I think in the next 3 to 5 years, the portfolio is going to exponentially increase. The deals, I think, are going to start happening more quickly. My partners and I are now looking in multiple different kinds of real estate. Now it's not just multifamily we're focusing on. We're also looking at boutique hotels. We have one under contract right now. We're doing a lot of Airbnbs, and we might do funds in the future. So there's the business is now branching out into multiple avenues of real estate, attracting different kinds of investors and more investors. So I really see exponential growth in the next 3 to 5 years. It's something I'm really excited for. For the listeners that don't know, I quit my W-2 job as the air traffic controller in March of this year. So now that I'm full-time working on this stuff, I'm full-time coming up with new business ideas, I just see a lot of growth in the future, and I'm really excited for it, and I'm dedicated, and I'm ready to just be on the grind.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. The optimism is encouraging and enthusiastic and infectious. Hopefully, it's infectious to the people who are listening to this as well. Francisco, I'm sorry, I didn't.
Yeah, I'm curious. I had a quick question, Shawn. So I'm curious. I know you started off multifamily, jumped into the podcast being the multifamily takeoff, but now I know you guys, you and Rich and your partners, you guys have been heavily focusing on Airbnbs. How is that? How do you see that going as far as being a much more lucrative, I guess, avenue or vehicle as opposed to multifamily? Because you guys kind of shifted from that. Where like, do you favor that a lot more? I know the returns are, and it blew up. Everyone's kind of getting into the Airbnb space, but do you prefer that specific play as opposed to the multifamily, or what's the future going to play?
I love that question. So here's my answer: is that I still like both of them for different reasons. Now, the thing about the Airbnbs as an investment class is that it's very heavy on the cash flow. You're going to get crazy awesome cash flow from day one. We're talking like I had a new property I put online in January of this year. Right now we're in June, and I've already exceeded a 15% cash on cash return. So this property is probably going to do north of 30% cash on cash return in year one. And multifamily, it's the opposite. Well, let me finish too with Airbnbs. You know, you're in residential properties most of the time, unless you're getting a boutique hotel. But let's just assume we're getting single family homes. Your appreciation is going to be dependent on the market. It's not like a value add multifamily where you're going to sell for a huge profit, unless you just get really lucky with the market appreciation, things like that, or you do a flip and then make it an Airbnb. But generally, I'm buying new, really nice properties, and it's all cash flow. Multifamily I still love because I could still bring in a lot of investors. Their cash flow isn't going to be as sexy. I mean, you might get 6 to 8%, maybe be in the double digits nowadays. That's getting harder to do. But you can get a acceptable cash flow, but then the pop really comes at the end. Like, you get a huge check when you go and sell the property. And so your overall average annual return is going to be still amazing with multifamily. But the reason why myself, Mike, and Rich have put a lot of emphasis on that Airbnb stuff is because we wanted to quit our W-2 jobs. We wanted to free up time to dedicate to all of these ventures, and Airbnb was the ticket. That's really what's supporting my lifestyle right now. 100% what's supporting my lifestyle is all my Airbnbs. So I can now pay the bills, I could save money, and dedicate my time to this. So I love them too for just different ways. And with multifamily, as you guys know, it's become so sexy, and it's provided everyone with such great returns that everybody that has money, all that dry powder, has just been dumping on multifamily. And so it's a lot more difficult to get those great deals. And like I said, the return profiles have changed a little bit. We're still looking at, doubling investor money in 3 to 5 years, things like that. But the cash flow is just a little bit less. So, hopefully I didn't ramble too much, but that's the kind of the reasons I like each of those, and I just use them for different purposes.
Yeah, no, that's a great answer. Great answer.
Yeah.
It is. I suspected that would be the case. I mean, the cash flow is you can't beat it with Airbnb. No multifamily, no matter how good it gets, is going to get the cash flow over Airbnbs. It's just it's almost like redonkulous of how good a cash flow it is if you find the right one and finance it right, obviously, and you run it right. Those are the three main components. You have to find it, at the right location, finance it right, and you have to run it right. I assume you agree with those three posits in the close to that. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because don't get it twisted. Because it's not like any run-of-the-mill Airbnb is gonna, do stuff like that. I think that Airbnb it's a different business model, right? If you're gonna be a really good performer, there's just different things you got to focus on. So I agree 100%.
Nice, man. Nice. I know you're an avid reader. Any top 2 reading books that you recommend for people getting into multifamily?
Ooh, getting into multifamily. I'm gonna suggest 2 books. The top one that I like to suggest is called The Best Ever Real Estate Book. What's his name that wrote that book?
That's I know what you're talking about.
The Best Ever Real Estate or Apartment Syndication Book. If you're a listener and you want to learn the ins and outs, that's a good one that just kind of goes through all the details. And then another book that I want to recommend to everybody is called Who, Not How. I like that book because that's going to teach you that instead of trying to figure out how you can do everything, you need to be finding who can help you, or who you can hire, or who you can partner with to take you to the next level. Because I think in real estate, you can do it all yourself if you want to, but it's going to take you way longer. Yeah. So if it wasn't for us having John Azar on the podcast, and then eventually bringing him and his brother on as mentors and partnering with them, my life would be a lot different. So, I wouldn't be here if I would have tried this by myself. So I really suggest that to the listeners to try and speak some knowledge.
Nice. Awesome. Francisco, any closing thoughts?
That's awesome. Just one more question. So if you can give to the listeners, especially to the ones who are also in the position that they want to jump into real estate, what's your top advice to those beginning investors who want to get started?
Okay, so the top advice that is kind of in my mind right now is to just get in the game. And then, this is, I guess, 2 pieces of advice. Get in the game. I know you're at home thinking, well, what about the market? It's a crazy market. Stop, because just remember the best time to get in real estate was always 5 years ago. You're always going to wish that you would have bought it 5 years ago. The market's going to fluctuate. It could keep going up. Don't worry about it. Just don't sell if it doesn't make sense to sell. But I would say get involved so you could start learning. You're going to learn way more that way. And then don't stop with the education. Learn as much as you can. Stop playing video games. Take it seriously. If you're sitting at home and you're watching Netflix or something like that and you're thinking about how bad you want to get into this and you haven't learned everything yet, you're wasting your time. No one's going to do it for you. Get your butt off the couch. Start learning.
That's powerful. That's powerful. Hit it on. I love it. Yeah, man.
That's right, baby.
Get it done. Stop procrastinating. Get off those video games. There we go. Hard-hitting words.
Let's go, man.
I love it. Actions, baby. Actions.
That's great.
Oh, man. Great. Well, brother, it was great to have you. It was amazing to talk to you and chat with you. It's always a pleasure to connect. So thank you for coming on the show again. In closing, how do people find you? Where do they find you to get in contact with you?
You could even just, if you're watching this, you can Google my name and find the website. But pac3capital.com is our website. That's PAC, the number 3, capital, CAPITAL.com. That's our website, and then you'll be able to reach out to me on there, by clicking a button, whatever you want to do. I'm always available to hop on calls, things like that.
And then also, just so I can throw this in there, Shawn, he's also in San Diego, and I know you guys run a real cool networking event. You want to? I'm not sure when is it.
What is it called?
Second
Deals
Wednesday.
and beers or something like that?
Second
Beers and deals.
Beers and deals. Yeah, if you
Beers
are in
and
SoCal
deals.
and you're listening to this, we have a real estate meetup in San Diego called Beers and Deals. There's no pitching. We don't have speakers or anything. It's literally just usually over 100 people at this place in Little Italy, and it's just grabbing a beer, chatting real estate, making connections,
Yep.
and I've made so many good connections. Beers and Deals. You could literally search Beers and Deals on the Meetup app. We also advertise on Bigger Pockets. If you go to our website, you'll see it. But if you're in town or you live down here, I think you would benefit
Sweet.
from showing up.
Yeah, highly recommend.
I have not been to it
It's
yet.
amazing.
I have not
Great
been to it
people.
yet. So I need to do
awesome.
this beers and deals. I've been telling the guys I need to fly out to San Diego and do one of those meetups.
Hell yeah.
I do need to
spend a
spend the
week out
week
here
out
with us,
there.
man.
I
Besides
do
the
need to
sick
spend the week
views,
out there.
you get to
So
meet
we'll
some
get it done. We'll get it done. Hopefully get it done this summer. I was hoping to get it done earlier, like when the year first started. I talked to Rich about it, but then never happened. But it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen. So, brother, thank you again, and thank you so much for being on the show with us. Thank you guys for listening,
Thank you, Shawn.
and we'll all this information will be in the show notes as well. Thanks, Sean.